join you in your worship and also to break the Word of God to you. And particularly in this, the 71st anniversary of the foundation of the church here at Dundonald. As we think about what to speak about, I want to turn to Matthew chapter 5. Matthew's Gospel, chapter 5. Because anniversaries, of course, are a great time to look back. Dig out the old photographs, anniversaries and the beginnings of marriages, the formation of friendships, and the essential core of a church. It's a moment to come back and to say, what are we really here for? What is the purpose of a church? What is the foundation upon which a church rests? And I think the Sermon on the Mount is uniquely well suited to answer those kinds of questions because, of course, it concludes famously with the parable of the wise and the foolish builders. You remember we used to sing, the wise man built his house upon a rock and the rain came tumbling down. Because the conclusion of this whole sermon, the end to which it is all tending, is that Jesus says, everyone who hears the words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. Because that house is the house that will endure the storm and the flood. And that, in its essence, is the promise of the Sermon on the Mount. And so when we studied the Sermon on the Mount last year in Carryduff, I called the series Built on Rock, because that's what this sermon is about. It's about a life built on rock. Now, we're not looking at the conclusion this morning, but at the beginning of the sermon. Because very often in a building project, you have to begin with a little bit of demolition. You have to get things out of the way for a clear foundation. And the opening words of the Sermon on the Mount establish exactly that. And perhaps when we consider a 71st anniversary, perhaps it's time just to revisit, has something accumulated? Has our view and our assumptions been shaped gradually over years by the world instead of by God? Well, that means that this too may be useful here, because what Jesus is doing is clearing the ground for the immovable building of the church. And in short, the call of these opening words, it's a call to change your values. So let's read together Matthew chapter 5, verses 1 to 12. I'm reading from the NIV translation. Now, when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on a mountainside and sat down. His disciples came to him, and he began to teach them. He said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you." Those are God's words. Now, I want to hopefully show you a picture. Would you take a look? Yeah, so if I bring this along, I want you to have a look at that picture. That's a photograph of Harrods in London, world-famous department store. And it's quite striking because it just has captured a moment. There's a perfect reflection of it in a sheet of water that happened to be on the street in front of it. The strange thing about the picture is I think the longer you look at it, the more there's something a little bit off about it. There's something a little bit strange about the colors in the clouds. And, you know, sometimes the little brain on your phone is trying to do smart and clever things, and it desaturates and resaturates and all kinds of stuff. So maybe there's that. And you keep on looking at it, and there's a couple of strange artifacts, kind of like grainy areas. Is it lens flare? Is it just light has captured? and the edge of it is a little bit peculiar. And the longer you look at it, it starts to get a little bit irritating in your head, and I can't quite figure out what's wrong. If you're like me, you'll probably have to have somebody tell you what's wrong with it, and it's quite simply that the picture is upside down. The reason the clouds look a bit funny is because they're sitting in a little film of oil off all the buses, and that's why the picture looked off. The artifacts aren't really lens flared, it's just the pavement shining through the puddle. That's the kind of abrupt change in perspective, a sudden realization I've been looking at everything wrong, that the opening words of the Sermon on the Mount is supposed to accomplish in your head. The Sermon on the Mount, aimed at building on rock, starts with tearing down a wrong way of looking at the world. These opening words are supposed to challenge, they're supposed to irritate you, they're supposed to confuse you. They're supposed to challenge the kind of things you want from the world and what it is you actually value. They're supposed ultimately to make you realize, I've been looking at things upside down all my life. What I thought was important and capable of giving me meaning and purpose and security in the life is actually nothing of the sort. These words that we've just read, they are deliberately disorienting because they are a call to us to change our values, to change what we value. And it does that with the language of blessing. The opening verses, of course, are traditionally called the Beatitudes, because beatitude is just it's an old English word. It comes from the Latin word beate, which is the Latin translation for blessed. So Beatitudes are just a bunch of descriptions of blessedness. But what is blessedness? What do you mean when you say a thing is blessed? You might say it means simply to be happy. And there are some translations of the Bible that go with that. Happy is happy are the mourn, happy are those who mourn, happy are the poor in spirit. And it does capture something of the meaning of the word. But the danger is it makes it sound a little bit like luck. In fact, our English word happiness comes from the Old English hap, which means good luck. But luck has nothing to do with blessedness. Blessedness is the situation of someone whose position in life you envy. Blessedness is something that has been done to you. Blessedness is intentional. When someone talks about a blessed life, that's the life you wish you had. It is the life you aspire to. So people post pictures on Instagram of their dream holiday or their new baby, and they say, we are blessed. This is life. In which case, these are some pretty messed up blessings. I mean, blessed are the poor. No one posts on Instagram, we've just lost our house, blessed. Blessed are those who mourn. Am I supposed to envy that? I mean, some of them are a bit better. Blessed are the peacemakers. I mean, it sounds like hard work, but at least it's commendable. But then it's back to blessed are those who are persecuted. And you're supposed to be asking yourself, what on earth is going on? There's something not quite right with this picture. And so let me reassure you, you're not, earthly and carnal because you're confused by this. You're supposed to be. Like that picture, it's supposed to make your brain itch. Because Jesus is trying to make us see the strangeness of the fact that all along we've been looking at the world upside down. And the things that we value are really quite valueless. The first thing the opening words of the Sermon on the Mount try to do is to get us to see a new world. It helps perhaps to go back to see how Beatitudes were used in the Old Testament, because, Jesus didn't invent this. Jesus didn't invent Beatitudes. The Old Testament is full of sayings that begin, blessed are. The book of Psalms famously begins in Psalm 1 by calling us to envy and to admire the man who does not walk in step with the wicked or stand in the way that sinners take. He's blessed. David in Psalm 32 tells us to consider blessed those whose transgressions are forgiven and whose sins are covered. And the thing to notice about them is that these are not the natural aspirations of our heart. No child ever put that on his wish list for Santa. Very few of us, I imagine, have this as our natural dream and ambition for the perfect life. You know, ask a child, what do you want to be when you grow up? Well, I want to be someone who does not walk in step with the wicked or stand in the way that sinners take. No child says that unless they're in Sunday school. What are you hoping for in this new year? To find forgiveness for my transgressions? And some way to cover my sins? That's not what we usually do when we're saying normal conversation, is it? These are not normal ambitions. For many of us, being forgiven it's actually an unpleasant necessity. In fact, I would consider it a blessing to be able to avoid that guy. The guy who I let myself down in front of yesterday. It would be great if he wasn't at work tomorrow. That would be a blessing for me. Not having to look him in the eye and confess that I behaved abominably. These things are not our natural idea of blessing. And you begin to realize Beatitudes have always been challenges. A challenge to change what you think blessing is. Challenges to change our values. And in the opening words of perhaps the greatest sermon ever preached, Jesus begins by taking that kind of challenge to glorious success. Not one, not two, not three, but 9 times. He hits our sense of what is good and valuable and to be envied in life with the biggest hammer he can find. He challenges us to consider the possibility that the person who is truly blessed, whose lifestyle we really ought to be eyeing enviously, well, maybe it's the guy who is poor, who has nothing to tie him to this world. Maybe it's the one who, dreadful circumstance, has been taught to mourn and knows the brevity of life. Maybe the best way to respond to these Beatitudes is to ask ourselves, what do I honestly believe to be a blessed life? What is it that I consider worthy of aspiring to? What do you wish for? What are you saving for? Very often you want to understand what's in a man's heart. Don't listen to his prayers. Look at his credit card statement. Where's the money going? What do you truly value? What does your perfect life look like? And is it expensive? Is the life you dream of, does it require you to win the lottery? Does it require a $5,000 pay rise at work? Look back. What have you most sacrificed in your life in pursuit of? How many friendships have you let fade in the pursuit of advancement at work? Yes, he's a great mate, but I need to get on. How many biblical convictions have you been prepared to downplay, to put on the back step, just to be popular? Can't tell them about Jesus unless you're friends with him. What constitutes your idea of a blessed life? And is it possible that some of the hardships that Jesus talks about here might just turn out to be the best thing that could ever happen to you? They could even be counted as blessings if it opened your eyes to just how shallow and empty and unrewarding they actually are. Because one of the things that Jesus is trying to do in the Sermon on the Mount is to help us to see a new world. Not this old world with its lies and its promises and its assumptions, but a whole new way of thinking about everything. He calls it the kingdom of heaven. The Beatitudes begin and end with it in verse 3. The first Beatitude, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. They get a new world. You get poverty in this world is a horrible thing, but it loosens the grip that this world has on you. It can set you free to think of another. In verse 10, the penultimate beatitude, the last one in a way, because the ninth is a kind of summing up. This penultimate beatitude says, "Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." And this concept of a new world, a kingdom made by God, it's all through Christ's preaching. He is constantly talking about a new kingdom, not one like the Persians or the Babylonians, not an empire like Rome's or Britain's. It's not NATO or Russia or any kind of power structure that we understand. It is a new kind of kingdom built by God in which different things matter. And trying to get people to long for a world they've never seen is really hard. It's like trying to get somebody to eat chocolate who's never seen chocolate before. Eat this. Yes, but it's brown. Food is green. That's not right. It tastes really good. Yeah, it's really funny looking. I'm not eating that. The beatitude, you need to shock somebody. You need to get them to realize that boiled cabbage is not the height of culinary excellence. Being a Christian is not about doing the same things everybody else does, only better. It's about doing entirely different things for entirely different reasons. It's about getting ready for, dreaming of, talking about, and inviting others to a new world, a world that's already among us. You just can't see it yet. All you can see are the effects that it's having on the people who have become a part of it. The freedom they have from the love of money. I don't understand how they don't worry about it. It keeps me awake at night. You see it in the way that death is no longer this ultimate dread for them. How can they not be afraid? How can you take that news so calmly? You see it in people whose desires, whose hungers aren't for trivial things like money or wealth or sex, all of which disappoint, all of which fade. They seem to see something else, something they are convinced is eternal. And when you realize that the kingdom of God is a real thing, that in Jesus Christ it's already here, that it has in his words come near, so near that you can reach out and take it by faith in Jesus Christ, you begin to realize there really is a new world where there is comfort, a comfort that will one day fill the world. A new world that will fill the world with righteousness, where mercy is waiting for those who repent, where we will finally see God. And if we bow the knee now, he will receive us, not as its enemies, as we should be, but as its citizens, as his children. If you're not a Christian this morning, this is the appeal of the gospel. You come to Christ, and he makes you a part of a world you can't see yet, but will one day fill everything. He gives you new dreams, new hopes, new ambitions, and not ones that fade and let you down like everything else. If you come to Christ this morning, you will see a new world. It might even be worth being persecuted for or slandered about. It might even seem like a blessing. That's the first thing I want you to see, that these Beatitudes are intended to get us to see things differently, to realize that we've been seeing everything wrong, and to fix our eyes on a new world. And the way in which they do that is by offering us new goals. To a new world, it also adds a new goal. Jesus begins by saying, "Blessed are the poor." Except he's not just talking about those who have no money. He's talking about a much more profound kind of poverty. He says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit." He's talking about people who haven't just been drained of cash, but of joy. People who haven't just run out of money, but who have run out of hope, out of the will or the power just to go on. Have you ever felt poverty of spirit? It can sneak up on you, because you can go on for year after year spending yourself, perhaps on work, on family, on dreams and aspirations that just keep you going until one day you realize there's nothing left in the tank. I still haven't got what I was looking for. Or it can come crashing down on you suddenly with a single phone call, with a single betrayal about somebody you thought you were going to build your life with, and you've been doing what? you're so broken and so emptied by it, I don't even have the power to get up. It's a poverty of spirit, and I'm sure in a crowd of this size, some of you have felt it. Some of you might have come that way this morning. Some of you are sitting here saying, this is not the life I planned. This is not what I dreamed of. I'm drained and exhausted, and not just physically. I'm finding it hard to hope. I am poor in spirit. And the Sermon on the Mount begins by asking you radically, even offensively, consider the possibility that's a good thing. Blessed are the poor in spirit. It's not that whatever has happened to you is good. Absolutely not. That is not what Jesus is suggesting. It's not that feeling like this is something you should be grateful for. But is it possible it's good you find out how fickle this world's promises and dreams and goals are before it's too late? Isn't it good to know that to build your life on a single person, no matter how wonderful they seem to you, is not enough? Because the best of people break, the best of people fail us. Isn't it good to know that before you stand before the judge of all the earth and realize you built your house on sand and there is nothing left? Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Because no one reaches for the kingdom of heaven until they've realized that all the kingdoms of the world are a lie. And this is how all the Beatitudes work. It says, blessed are those who mourn, not because death is a good thing or because it's good to be bereaved, but because when we realize there's nothing in this world that can fix this. You stand at the side of a grave of someone you love, and there is no promotion. There is no realm of success in career or family that is going to fix that. I need something outside this world. I need a new world. And as you look at these Beatitudes, there is a kind of progression, actually, in the way that this realization works. The first three Beatitudes are all passive. Blessed are those who are poor, who mourn, who are meek. They have felt the emptiness of this world. They have tasted the brevity of its blessings. They have learned to patiently endure the cruelties of this life. And Jesus says they are blessed because through those sorrows, they have learned that wealth is just a lie, which sets them free to look for better goals. They have learned from bitter experience that pride is just a mask that frightened people hide behind. They have seen behind the mask. And they realize if we are to inherit the earth, we must find another way. And then the next three Beatitudes, they show signs of change. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst. Blessed are those who are become merciful. Blessed are those whose hearts are changed, who are becoming pure. They aren't passive. The way poverty and sorrow and humility are passive, these are people who are beginning to act, who are beginning to be changed because they have begun to see that the picture is upside down. They have begun to look for something more than mere fleeting popularity or temporary happiness. And even if they haven't got it yet, they know they're on the right track. They have begun to show mercy. This new, an unexpected response of a heart that has learned to value mercy because I see how much I need myself. They have begun to find themselves changed inside. They have discovered a new purity in their imaginations and dreams, and all through faith in Jesus Christ. What I have begun to see now that the illusion has been thrown aside has changed me from the inside out. I've begun to glimpse what God is really like. And finally, the last three Beatitudes, they aren't passive. They don't simply describe change. They describe a longing to change others, which is the engine of the church. Blessed are the peacemakers who reach out, those who are prepared to risk the hatred of others in the pursuit of righteousness, who will happily stir up the slander of the world because you keep telling them about Jesus. And that third stage, that's what will sustain you as a church into 75 years and 80 years and 90 years. Beginning with this proper way of seeing the real world, this holding on to new goals. So what are your goals this morning? If you're a parent, what are your goals for your children? If you're married, what are the goals for your marriage? If you're in employment, what are your goals for your career? Do you want your children to be happy and prosperous above all else? Or can you put your hand on your heart and say, I would rather see them poor and troubled if only it kept them close to Christ? Can you make that dream for your children? Is your life arranged around anything that might disrupt your perfect Hollywood vision of the happily ever after marriage? Or do you instead see the reality of your marriage, that it is a platform, it is an arena in which the love of God can be played out for an unbelieving and misunderstanding world? The Beatitudes call us to pursue new goals in the light of the promise of a new world. And finally, these Beatitudes aren't just trying to shake us enough to see a new world. They're not just here to give us a dream of new goals. They're here to call us to pursue all of these things following a new guide. A new guide. Look at verse 11. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, falsely say all kinds of evil things against you because of me. Because of me. See, it's possible at this stage you're thinking, that sounds lovely, but how? How on earth do I change what I want? How do I change what I'm afraid of? How can I make sure that these trials, whether it's poverty or sorrow or humiliation, how can I be sure that they'll change me the way that the Beatitudes talk about, and they won't just make me bitter and angry, because so many people are made bitter and angry when things go wrong. How can I know? How can I make sure that they do the right thing? How can I get to the place where hunger and thirst for something that isn't money? How can I get rid of my fear of not being able to pay for the mortgage? How can I get out from under the concern that, am I going to have enough to pay for the groceries? Where am I going to get the courage to be willing to be insulted and persecuted for all of this and call it a blessing? And you've got to be honest about this. This is not natural. Being honest about how difficult and unnatural this is essential. Christianity has always gone adrift when it's got a hold of these ideas and felt, well, I ought to make myself feel this way. In the history of the church, there have been people who literally beat themselves with sticks and pretended they enjoyed it. Blessed are those who suffer. They've started fights as if fighting is pleasing to God. But all of that misses the fundamental point. We ask how, when we should be asking who. Who do I do it for? Who do I endure poverty for? Who do I bear up my mourning for? Who is my guide? Who is my sun and my moon and my stars? Who is the delight of my heart? Who is the one I'm doing everything for? Jesus came to be a new guide. When we give ourselves to him, when we commit ourselves to him, when we put everything we have in his hands, well then, blessed are you. Even if people insult you and persecute you and falsely say all kinds of evil against you, if it's because of me. And Jesus doesn't fully explain how all of that works out. This is, after all, only the introduction to the sermon. But this is the key to the answer. When you do it for him. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil because of me. You see, there's no virtue in being hated. There are some Christians who seem to think there is. That if people are giving you a hard time in work, you must be doing something right. You know, if they're accusing you of being a narrow-minded bigot, if HR is all over you because of the things you say, well, that means you're doing the Lord's work. Or it might just mean that you're a pain. It might just mean you're just a thoughtless, ill-mannered lump, and you hide behind Jesus as your excuse. Who am I really doing these things for? That's the key. See, sometimes you can be tempted. I'm going to pick a fight, to be valiant, to be righteous. I'm going to stand my ground. That's for me. When I face a fight that I don't want, but which I can't see any way to avoid without denying Christ, then I'm doing it for him. You see the difference? Blessed are you when they insult you because of me. And so if we are to grow, to evolve in this progression of the Beatitudes, we've got to ask ourselves, do I do the things I do really because of him? Do I hunger and thirst after righteousness because everybody in church will be so impressed by me on Sunday? Or do I do it because of him? Do I speak the way I speak and work because of Jesus, or because saying I'm a Christian gives me license to say things that are not politically correct? Is it because of him, or just because you want to shock? 50 years ago, if you want to be bold and transgressive, you went and did drugs and joined a commune. Now, if you want to be bold and transgressive, you say you're a Christian and believe that a marriage is one man and one woman. And some people say that just to start a fight. That's not for him, that's for you. Who are we doing these things for? It's not so much what you do, and it's not even wholly why you do it. It's who you do it for. That's what will make all the difference in your life. Answering that question as a church will not determine whether or not your church here endures for another 71 years, because there's an awful lot of rubbish churches that just won't die. But it will determine whether or not your church should endure for another 71 years. Are you doing what you do here in Dundonald because of him? Or because we always did? Because my father started this and I'm not letting it stop? Is he your guide? Or is he simply your excuse? Because if he is your guide, if he owns your heart, if you truly do what you do here in Dundonald because of him, then you really will give the people of this area and the people in your community a glimpse of a new world, in the lives of people who have a new goal because they are following a new guide. We're going to sing again before the table a song that reminds us of the